Before we begin, I want you to promise me something. If this story moves you even a little, if it reminds you of your parents, your struggles, or the dreams you're still chasing, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this deserve to be heard and shared. Now imagine this, a tired delivery boy from New York, hands rough from winter winds, standing on the biggest stage in America's Got Talent, and the first note he sings leaves Simon Cowell completely speechless. It was a freezing evening in Queens, New York. The streets were glowing with yellow taxi lights, and snow clung to the edges of sidewalks. Miguel Santos, 23 years old, zipped up his worn navy delivery jacket and adjusted the insulated food bag strapped to his back. His bike chain squeaked as he pedaled through traffic. Another delivery. Another tip that might help him pay rent. Another long night. To most people, Miguel was invisible. Just another immigrant delivery rider weaving through Manhattan traffic. But inside him lived something powerful, something he had carried all the way from a small fishing village in Batangas, Philippines. Music. Back home, his mother used to wake him up by singing. Not pop songs. Not lullabies. She sang the Philippine National Anthem every morning as she cooked rice over a small stove. She would place her hand over her heart and tell Miguel, "Never forget where you come from. Even if the world forgets you." Miguel didn't forget. Even when his father passed away from illness. Even when his family sold their small boat to afford his plane ticket to America. Even when he landed in New York with nothing but one suitcase and a promise, "I'll make you proud." Life in America was not the dream he imagined. He worked double shifts at a restaurant. He sent most of his earnings home. He practiced singing only at night, quietly, so his roommates wouldn't complain. Sometimes he sang in the stairwell of his apartment building because the echo made him feel like he was in a concert hall. One night, after a long shift, Miguel delivered food to a small apartment in Brooklyn. When the customer opened the door, he heard Miguel softly humming while handing over the bag. "Wait," the woman said. "Was that you singing?" Miguel looked down shyly. "Yes, ma'am. Just practicing." She smiled. "You have a beautiful voice. Have you ever auditioned for something?" Miguel laughed nervously. "No. I'm just a delivery guy." But she wasn't just a customer. She was a vocal coach. And that moment changed everything. Weeks later, after much convincing, Miguel stood in line outside the America's Got Talent audition hall. He almost left 3 times. He stared at the giant AGT banner and thought, "This isn't for people like me." But then he remembered his mother's voice. "Never forget where you come from." When Miguel walked onto the AGT stage, the lights were blinding. The audience clapped politely. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, expression neutral. "What's your name?" Simon asked. "Miguel Santos, sir." "And what do you do, Miguel?" "I'm a delivery rider in New York." A few soft murmurs from the audience. "And what will you be singing tonight?" Miguel took a deep breath. "I will sing the Philippine National Anthem." There was a brief silence. It was an unusual choice. Not a pop song. Not a dramatic ballad. Just a national anthem. Simon raised an eyebrow. "That's a big song. Why that one?" Miguel's voice trembled. "Because it reminds me who I am, and who I'm doing this for." The music began softly. The first note left Miguel's lips like a whisper carried by wind. Clear. Pure. Controlled. The audience straightened in their seats. By the second line, something shifted. His voice grew stronger, richer, filled with emotion that didn't need translation. The anthem soared through the theater. He wasn't just singing words. He was singing memories of his mother cooking at sunrise. He was singing his father's tired hands. He was singing the long bike rides through snow. He was singing for every immigrant who felt unseen. Halfway through the song, the camera caught something incredible. Simon Cowell had stopped writing. His usual critical expression was gone. He was staring directly at Miguel. The high note approached. Miguel closed his eyes and let everything go. Fear. Doubt. Exhaustion. He sang the final note with such power that it echoed long after the music stopped. Complete silence. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then the entire auditorium erupted. The audience stood. Some were crying. A woman in the front row placed her hand over her heart. Even the judges were visibly emotional. Simon leaned forward slowly. Miguel. I didn't understand a single word you sang. But I felt every single word. The audience applauded again. That, Simon continued, is what music is supposed to do. It connects us without explanation. And you, my friend, have one of the most honest voices we've heard this season. Miguel's eyes filled with tears. Another judge added, you reminded us tonight that talent doesn't care about job titles. It doesn't matter if you're a delivery writer or a superstar. Simon looked directly at him. I think your mother would be very proud. Miguel broke down. When it came time to vote, the judges didn't hesitate. For yes. But the moment didn't end there. As Miguel walked backstage, still shaking, his phone buzzed. Hundreds of missed calls. Messages from the Filipino community in New York. From strangers. From people back home in Batangas watching through livestream. And then one video call appeared. Mama. He answered, and there she was, crying, hand over her heart. You didn't forget, she whispered. No, Ma, he said through tears. I didn't. In the weeks that followed, Miguel's audition went viral. Millions of views. News headlines called him the singing delivery writer. Donations poured in for his family. But more important than fame was something deeper. Representation. Filipino immigrants across America began sharing their own stories. Delivery writers messaged him saying they now sang while riding through the city, proud instead of ashamed. Children in the Philippines watched and believed their dreams were possible too. Miguel didn't win AGT that year. But he won something greater. He won respect. He won identity. He won his voice. Months later, he stood on a small stage in Central Park for a community event. No giant LED screens. No global broadcast. Just families, food stalls, and children waving Philippine flags. Before singing, he spoke into the microphone. Sometimes, the world sees your job and thinks that's who you are. But you are more than your uniform. You are more than your struggle. And you should never be ashamed of where you started. The crowd cheered. He began singing the anthem again. This time, thousands sang with him. And somewhere in the crowd, unnoticed, stood Simon Cowell, smiling quietly. Because sometimes, the most powerful performances aren't about winning a trophy. They're about reminding the world that greatness can ride a bicycle through snow, carrying food on its back, and still carry a nation in its heart. If this story touched you, if Miguel's journey reminded you of your own struggles or someone you love, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs motivation today. Because you never know, the next delivery rider you see might be carrying more than just a package. They might be carrying a dream. Before you scroll, before you click away, let me ask you something. What if the next food delivery at your door wasn't just a tired worker trying to make ends meet, but a voice powerful enough to silence Simon Cowell? Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happened on that AGT stage will remind you that no dream is ever too small and no dreamer is ever invisible. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing journeys that truly matter. New York City never sleeps. And neither did 24-year-old Daniel Reyes. By day, he was just another delivery boy riding through Times Square traffic, balancing paper bags of takeout while taxis honked impatiently. His red insulated delivery backpack was faded, the zipper slightly broken. His sneakers were worn at the soles. Winter winds slapped his face as he biked across the Brooklyn Bridge, but he kept pedaling. Because back home in Cebu, Philippines, his mother was waiting for the money he sent every month. Daniel had arrived in America 3 years earlier with hope packed tightly inside a single suitcase. He imagined skyscrapers and opportunity. What he found instead were double shifts, shared apartments, and nights so exhausting he fell asleep still wearing his uniform. But there was one thing he never let go of. Every morning before leaving his apartment, Daniel stood by the small window, faced east, placed his hand over his heart, and softly sang Lupang Hinirang, the Philippine National Anthem. It reminded him who he was. It reminded him that even if he felt small in America, he came from somewhere proud and strong. One evening, while waiting outside a restaurant in Manhattan, Daniel absent-mindedly sang as he leaned against his bike. He didn't realize someone inside was listening. A man stepped out. "Hey," he said. "Was that you singing?" Daniel looked embarrassed. "Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "Disturb?" That was beautiful. The man introduced himself as a music producer's assistant. He told Daniel about open auditions for America's Got Talent happening the following week. Daniel laughed nervously. "AGT? No. I'm just a delivery writer." But that night, he couldn't sleep. The idea echoed louder than the city traffic. What if? The day of the audition arrived. Daniel wore his only formal outfit, a simple white button-down shirt and black pants slightly too short at the ankles. He couldn't afford a suit. His hands trembled as he stood backstage, surrounded by dancers in glittering costumes and singers with vocal coaches. He almost walked out. But then he remembered his mother's words before he left the Philippines: "Anak, even if you go far away, carry our song with you." When Daniel stepped onto the AGT stage, the crowd clapped politely. The judges smiled. "What's your name?" Simon Cowell asked. "Daniel Reyes, sir." "And what do you do for a living?" "I deliver food in New York." A few audience members nodded sympathetically. "And what are you singing tonight?" Daniel swallowed hard. "The Philippine National Anthem." The room grew quiet. Simon leaned forward slightly. "That's an unusual choice." "Why?" Daniel took a shaky breath. "Because when you leave your country to survive, sometimes the only thing you have left is your song." The music began. Soft piano notes floated across the theater. Daniel closed his eyes. The first line came out steady but gentle. His voice carried a natural warmth, like sunlight after rain. As he moved into the second verse, something extraordinary happened. The nerves disappeared. The delivery boy vanished. In his place stood an artist. His voice expanded, filling every corner of the auditorium. It wasn't just technically strong, it was emotional, controlled, proud. Each note carried longing. Each lyric carried sacrifice. The camera captured audience members wiping tears. When Daniel reached the anthem's powerful climax, he lifted his chin and sang with everything he had endured: lonely holidays, aching legs from cycling 12 hours a day, missed birthdays, homesickness so heavy it felt physical. The final note rang out like a declaration. Then silence. A heavy, breathtaking silence. Simon Cowell, known for his sharp critiques, simply stared. For a full 5 seconds, he said nothing. Then he slowly stood up. The entire audience followed. A standing ovation. Daniel's chest heaved as he tried to process what was happening. Simon finally spoke. "Daniel, I judged thousands of performances. But very rarely does someone walk onto the stage and sing not to impress us, but to represent something bigger than themselves." The crowd applauded again. "I didn't need to understand the language," Simon continued. "Because what you gave us was honesty. And honesty is rare." Another judge added, "You reminded every immigrant watching tonight that their story matters." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. When it came time to vote, the answer was unanimous. For yes. Backstage, Daniel fell to his knees, overwhelmed. His phone buzzed non-stop. Messages flooded in from Filipino communities across the U.S. From strangers thanking him, from writers like him who said they now felt proud wearing their delivery uniforms. Then came the call that broke him completely. His mother appeared on video, crying. "You sang for all of us," she whispered. "No, Ma," he replied, voice shaking. "I sang because of you." Daniel didn't win the entire competition. But something more powerful happened. Restaurants began recognizing him. Customers started tipping him extra just to say, "We saw you on AGT." Filipino flags appeared at his future performances. Children sent him drawings of themselves singing. He eventually reduced his delivery hours and began performing at cultural events, charity concerts, and community gatherings. Yet he never threw away his red delivery backpack. He kept it as a reminder. Months later, during a return performance on AGT for a special episode, Simon asked him something unexpected. "Daniel, if you could say one thing to people watching who feel invisible, what would it be?" Daniel smiled softly. "Just because the world doesn't clap for you yet, doesn't mean you're not worthy of a stage." The audience erupted. Because here's the truth this story teaches us: your job does not define your destiny. Your struggle does not cancel your talent. And your roots are not something to hide, they are something to sing proudly. Somewhere in New York right now, a delivery rider is pedaling through traffic, dreaming quietly. Somewhere in the world, someone feels unseen. Maybe that someone is you. So if this story inspired you even a little, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone chasing a dream in silence. Because sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room belongs to the person no one was looking at. And sometimes, all it takes is one song to remind the world who you are. Stop for a moment and imagine this. The next time your doorbell rings and a tired delivery boy hands you your food, what if that same young man could step onto the biggest stage in America, open his mouth, and leave Simon Cowell completely speechless? Stay with me until the very end, because this story isn't just about talent, it's about sacrifice, identity, and a dream that refused to die. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more powerful journeys like this to life. In the heart of Manhattan, under neon lights and endless traffic noise, 25-year-old Rafael "Rafi" Mendoza pedaled his electric bike through the cold night air. His bright green delivery jacket glowed under streetlights. His hands were rough from winter winds, his back sore from carrying heavy orders, but he kept moving. Because quitting was never an option. 3 years earlier, Rafi had left Davao City in the Philippines. His father's small repair shop had closed during hard times, and medical bills for his younger sister were piling up. When Rafi received a chance to work in America, he promised his family, "I'll help us start over." New York welcomed him with noise, speed, and loneliness. He worked 12-hour shifts delivering food across Brooklyn and Manhattan. Rain soaked him. Snow slowed him. Some customers smiled kindly. Others barely looked at him. To most people, he was just another delivery guy rushing down the street. But inside Rafi lived something bigger. Music had always been his refuge. Back home, he sang in school ceremonies and town fiestas. His late grandfather, a retired soldier, had taught him the Philippine National Anthem with deep pride. "Sing it with honor," his grandfather used to say. "It carries our history." Every night after work, Rafi stood on the rooftop of his small apartment building in Queens. With the city skyline glowing behind him, he practiced singing softly into the wind. He imagined an audience beyond the skyscrapers. He imagined his family watching. One evening, after delivering food to a theater rehearsal studio, Rafi heard piano music inside. Without thinking, he quietly sang along while waiting for the elevator. A stage manager overheard him. "Hey, who's singing?" she called out. Rafi froze. "Sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to disturb." Disturb? That voice doesn't belong in a hallway. That unexpected compliment planted a dangerous idea in his heart. America's Got Talent auditions were happening in the city. For weeks, Raffi ignored the thought. AGT was for polished performers. He was just a delivery rider sending money home. But every time he sang on that rooftop, the idea grew louder. Finally, one cold morning, still wearing his delivery jacket, he stood in line outside the audition venue. Performers around him wore glittering outfits and carried expensive instruments. Raffi clutched a folded Philippine flag in his pocket for courage. When his turn came, the stage lights felt blinding. The audience applauded politely as he walked out. "What's your name?" Simon Cowell asked. "Rafael Mendoza, sir. But you can call me Raffi." "And what do you do?" "I deliver food in New York." Simon gave a small nod. "And what will you be singing?" Raffi hesitated, then answered clearly. "The Philippine National Anthem." There was a noticeable pause. Simon leaned forward. "That's a bold choice." "Why?" Raffi swallowed hard. "Because when you leave home to survive, sometimes your anthem is the only thing that reminds you who you are." The theater grew quiet. The music began. Soft orchestral notes floated across the stage. Raffi closed his eyes. The first line came out steady, emotional but controlled. His voice wasn't flashy, it was sincere. Each word carried weight, like he was lifting memories with every breath. As the song built, his voice expanded, strong, resonant, proud. The audience leaned forward. Some didn't understand the language, but they understood the emotion. Cameras caught judges exchanging surprised glances. Then came the powerful climax of the anthem. Raffi sang it not as a performer seeking applause, but as a son, a brother, a Filipino standing thousands of miles from home. His voice soared with raw intensity, filling every corner of the auditorium. The final note echoed, and hung in the air. Silence. Complete silence. Simon Cowell, known for his sharp tongue and quick critiques, simply stared at Raffi. The audience began to rise one by one until the entire theater stood in thunderous applause. Raffi's chest trembled. He tried to hold back tears, but they came anyway. Simon finally spoke. "Raffi, I've heard many national anthems on this stage. But rarely have I heard one sung with that much personal truth." The audience cheered again. "You weren't just singing for a country," Simon continued. "You were singing for every person who has ever felt far from home." Another judge added, "Your job does not define your talent. Tonight, you reminded millions that dignity and dreams can ride the same bicycle." Raffi nodded, unable to speak. When it came time to vote, the judges didn't hesitate. For yes. Backstage, Raffi collapsed into tears. His phone was exploding with notifications. Filipino communities across America were posting clips. Delivery riders were sharing the video with captions like, "One of us made it." Then came the call he had been waiting for. His younger sister appeared on screen, holding a small Philippine flag. "Kuya," she cried, "we're watching you on TV." Raffi covered his face, overwhelmed. In the weeks that followed, his audition went viral. News outlets called him the singing delivery hero. Donations helped pay for his sister's treatment. He began receiving invitations to perform at cultural events and charity concerts. But despite the attention, Raffi never quit his delivery job immediately. He said something in an interview that touched millions. "This jacket fed my family. I will never be ashamed of it." Months later, AGT invited him back for a special performance. This time, the stage felt different. He walked out wearing a simple barong Tagalog, proudly representing his heritage. Before singing, Simon asked him, "What changed since your audition?" Raffi smiled softly. "Now, when I deliver food, customers look me in the eye. They see me." And that was the real victory. He didn't win the grand prize that season. But he won respect, visibility, pride. He proved that sometimes, the strongest voices don't come from famous backgrounds or expensive training. Sometimes they come from rooftops, from long bike rides in winter, from hearts that refuse to forget where they came from. So the next time you see a delivery rider passing by, remember this story. Inside that uniform could be a dream waiting for its stage. If Rafi's journey touched your heart, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who feels invisible. Because you never know whose anthem is waiting to be heard. And maybe, just maybe, the next voice that leaves the world speechless is already pedaling through your neighborhood tonight. Wait, before you skip, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible? Like no matter how hard you work, the world only sees your uniform, not your heart? Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happened on that America's Got Talent stage will remind you that even the quietest dream can shake the loudest room. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because someone out there needs this motivation today. On a rainy evening in the Bronx, 22-year-old Adrian Villanueva tightened the straps of his delivery bag and checked his phone for the next order. The rain soaked through his thin gray hoodie, and traffic splashed dirty water onto his jeans. He wiped his face and kept moving. Back home in Iloilo, Philippines, his mother was counting on him. Adrian hadn't always imagined himself riding a bike through New York traffic. As a child, he dreamed of becoming a singer. He would stand on plastic chairs during family gatherings, holding a spoon like a microphone, singing with fearless joy while relatives cheered. But dreams change when responsibilities arrive. When his father suffered a stroke, Adrian quit college and worked construction jobs to help his family. Eventually, an opportunity came to work in America. It wasn't glamorous, it was delivery work, but it paid more than anything he could earn back home. He promised his mother, "Just give me time. I'll make everything better." America was bigger and harsher than he imagined. He shared a cramped apartment with 4 other workers. Some nights he skipped meals to send extra money home. Customers sometimes ignored his greetings. Some didn't even say thank you. But every morning, before heading out, Adrian stood in front of a small mirror, placed his hand over his chest, and sang Lupang Hinirang, the Philippine National Anthem. Not loudly, just enough to remind himself that he carried more than food on his back. He carried history. He carried pride. One afternoon, while waiting outside a restaurant in Manhattan, Adrian softly sang to pass the time. A street musician nearby stopped playing and listened. "Man," the musician said when Adrian finished, "you've got something special. Why aren't you auditioning somewhere?" Adrian laughed. "People like me don't go on big stages." But the idea refused to leave him. Weeks later, with trembling hands, Adrian registered for America's Got Talent auditions. He didn't tell anyone, not his roommates, not even his mother. He was afraid of failing publicly. The day of the audition, he walked onto the AGT stage wearing a simple black shirt and worn dress shoes he bought from a thrift store. The audience clapped politely. Simon Cowell looked at him curiously. "What's your name?" "Adrian Villanueva, sir." "And what do you do, Adrian?" "I'm a delivery rider in New York." There was a soft murmur in the audience. "And what will you sing?" Adrian inhaled deeply. "The Philippine National Anthem." Simon raised his eyebrows slightly. "That's an important song. Why choose that?" Adrian's voice trembled. "Because when you're far from home, sometimes your anthem is the only thing that makes you feel close again." The theater went quiet. The music began softly, just a piano at first. Adrian closed his eyes. The first note came out pure and steady, cutting through the silence like a beam of light. His voice wasn't loud yet, but it was honest. The kind of voice that didn't beg for attention, it commanded it. As he moved into the second verse, emotion flooded in. He thought of his father learning to walk again after the stroke. He thought of his mother's tired hands. He thought of rainy nights delivering food while fighting homesickness. His voice grew stronger. By the time he reached the anthem's soaring lines, the audience was completely still. Some placed their hands over their hearts instinctively. The high note came. Adrian opened his eyes and sang with everything he had carried inside for years: fear, sacrifice, hope, love. The note rang through the auditorium, powerful and unwavering. When the music stopped, silence filled the room. A heavy, emotional silence. Simon Cowell stared at him, lips slightly parted. Then slowly, Simon stood up. The entire audience followed in a thunderous standing ovation. Adrian's hands began shaking. He looked overwhelmed, almost confused by the reaction. Simon finally spoke. "Adrian. I didn't understand the words. But I understood the courage." The crowd cheered. "You walked out here as a delivery rider," Simon continued, "but you sang like a man representing millions of people who leave their homes for a better future." Another judge added, "That wasn't just a performance. That was your story." Adrian wiped tears from his eyes. When the votes came, it was 4 strong yes. Backstage, Adrian collapsed into a chair, covering his face. His phone was exploding with messages. Friends from the Filipino community had recognized him. Delivery riders across New York were sharing clips, writing captions like, "He sings for all of us." Then his phone rang. "Mama." He answered, trying to stay strong. On the other side, his mother was crying. "We saw you," she said. "Your father stood up when you sang." Adrian broke down completely. Though he didn't win the entire AGT competition, his audition went viral. News stations featured him. Community events invited him to perform. A fundraiser was organized to help with his father's medical expenses. But the most meaningful change was something simpler. Customers started looking him in the eye. Some would say, "Hey, aren't you the guy from AGT?" And Adrian would smile and nod. He continued delivering food for months while performing at small concerts on weekends. He never felt ashamed of his job again. Because he had learned something powerful. A uniform can hide your talent, but it can never erase it. Months later, during a return appearance on AGT, Simon asked him, "If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?" Adrian smiled gently. "I would say, don't let the world decide your worth based on your job. Your dream is bigger than your situation." The audience erupted. And somewhere in New York that night, delivery riders pedaled a little prouder. Immigrant families watched with hope in their eyes. Young dreamers realized that their background was not a limitation, it was their strength. So if this story moved you, if Adrian's journey reminded you of your own silent battles, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to believe again. Because sometimes, the person you least expect is carrying not just a delivery, but a dream powerful enough to silence the world. Before this story begins, I want you to picture something. A young man in a soaked delivery uniform, standing alone under the bright lights of America's Got Talent, judges staring, audience silent, and then one song changes everything. If you believe that dreams don't have a job title, stay with me until the end. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because someone out there needs this reminder today. His name was Marco Alonzo. He was 23 years old, and New York City knew him only as the fast delivery guy with the blue helmet. Every morning before sunrise, Marco unlocked his bike outside a small apartment in Queens. The hallway smelled like old paint and instant noodles. He shared the apartment with 3 other workers, all chasing different versions of the same dream. But Marco's dream had music in it. Back in Pampanga, Philippines, he had been the kid who sang at every school event. His teachers once told his mother, "Your son has a gift." But gifts don't always pay hospital bills. When his mother was diagnosed with a heart condition, Marco made the hardest decision of his life. He left home and flew to America with borrowed money and borrowed courage. "I'll come back stronger," he promised her at the airport. New York was colder than he expected. Not just the weather, the pace, the people, the loneliness. He worked long hours delivering food through Manhattan traffic. He memorized street names faster than song lyrics. He smiled even when customers didn't. At night, exhausted, he would sit on the edge of his bed and scroll through old videos of himself singing back home. Sometimes he whispered the lyrics so his roommates wouldn't tease him. The one song he never stopped singing was the Philippine National Anthem. It wasn't just a song. It was memory. It was home. It was the sound of school mornings, flag ceremonies, and his mother standing proudly with her hand over her heart. One snowy evening, Marco delivered food to a television production office. While waiting in the lobby, he noticed a piano in the corner. No one was around. He gently pressed a few keys and began singing the anthem softly. He didn't know that someone upstairs had heard him through the open stairwell. A producer came down moments later. "Was that you singing?" Marco froze. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just wasting your talent in a lobby," the man interrupted with a smile. That conversation led to something Marco never imagined, an audition slot for America's Got Talent. The night before the audition, Marco couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, fear whispering in his mind. What if I embarrass myself? What if I fail? What if I'm just a delivery guy pretending to be a singer? Then his phone buzzed. A message from his mother: "No matter what happens, sing with your heart." The next day, Marco walked onto the AGT stage wearing a simple white polo shirt and black trousers. No glitter. No dramatic entrance. Just him. The audience applauded politely. Simon Cowell looked at him with curiosity. "What's your name?" "Marco Alonzo, sir." "And what do you do?" "I'm a food delivery writer in New York." A few murmurs from the crowd. "And what are you singing tonight?" Marco's voice shook slightly. "The Philippine National Anthem." Simon leaned forward. "That's a big choice." "Why?" Marco paused. "Because I left my country to survive. But I don't ever want to forget where I came from." The room fell silent. The music began, soft strings, gentle piano. Marco closed his eyes. The first note came out fragile but clear. It floated through the theater like a quiet prayer. As he continued, his voice grew steadier, stronger. He wasn't performing for fame. He was singing for his mother lying in a hospital bed. For his younger siblings watching from thousands of miles away. For every immigrant who ever felt small in a big city. The second verse built with emotion. His voice carried a rich warmth that wrapped around the audience. Even those who didn't understand the language felt something rising inside them. Then came the final, soaring lines. Marco lifted his head and let the note fly. It was powerful. Controlled. Full of longing and pride. The last note echoed against the walls, and then silence. A deep, emotional silence. Simon Cowell didn't move. He simply stared at Marco, eyes softer than usual. Then, slowly, Simon stood up. The audience followed. A standing ovation. Marco's breathing became shaky. He looked stunned, like he couldn't believe what was happening. Simon finally spoke. "Marco, I've heard thousands of auditions. But that was one of the most sincere performances I've ever seen." The audience cheered again. "You didn't try to impress us," Simon continued. "You shared your heart. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any big production." Another judge added, "You reminded us that greatness can come from anywhere, even from someone delivering our dinner." Tears streamed down Marco's face. For yes. Backstage, Marco collapsed into tears. His phone was flooded with notifications. Filipino communities were celebrating. Delivery riders across New York were sharing his video with pride. Then came the video call. His mother appeared on screen, oxygen tube beside her, smiling through tears. "You made us proud," she whispered. Marco could barely speak. I sang for you, Ma. Though Marco didn't win the AGT grand prize, his audition changed his life. Donations helped with his mother's surgery. He began performing at charity events and community gatherings. He recorded songs that blended Filipino heritage with modern music. But he never forgot the bike. Months later, during an interview, someone asked him, "What did AGT teach you?" Marco smiled and said, "That your job is what you do, not who you are." And that's the message I want to leave you with today. Maybe you're working a job that doesn't match your dream. Maybe you feel unseen. Maybe you think your moment will never come. But sometimes, all it takes is one stage, one song, one chance. If Marco's journey touched your heart, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who feels invisible. Because you never know who's carrying a dream behind a uniform. And maybe, just maybe, the next person to silence a room full of doubters is already chasing their dream through the streets of your city tonight.